Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine.
Hey, what's happening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer. So today I have the pleasure of welcoming back my buddy Chris Meckley from ACI Aquaculture. What's up there, Chris? How you doing, man? Good to see you.
Doing great, Keith. Good to see you too, buddy. It's been a while since we've done this, and I was looking forward to it, and I'm glad you kind of pushed it up the week before.
Yeah. Hopefully I didn't throw anybody off here, but I think the last time we were talking before the live stream that you and I were just doing a solo live stream was back in either February or March, and then we had Mr. Jake Adams on, and that was an interesting conversation. I couldn't get a word in edgewise, so I'm just kidding if Jake is watching there. That I would love to have all three of us on again to have a great conversation. But just for those of you that don't know, Chris is the owner of ACI Aquaculture. They are a coral wholesaler, and he runs a business with his wife, Amanda. And how many on your staff now, Chris?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5. All right.
Just 5.
Staff
I need
5.
more, but it's hard to find
what
I'm looking for.
Are you taking job applications again? Is that what you're doing?
Yes. You can email Amanda at ACI Aquaculture or email info@aciaquaculture.com. And, we definitely would like to talk to some people.
There you go. All right. Before you and I start chatting, and I think this is going to be an awesome conversation, I want to thank the sponsors first, both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. Appreciate them supporting the show. I also appreciate everybody tuning in and supporting the show. And if you haven't already, please hit that like button so more people can find the live stream right now. And I see there's a lot of folks already on the stream, and there's a lot of comments. Chris, there's a lot of folks wanting to talk pH here tonight. So I'm sure that
awesome.
That will be a good topic.
I don't like to take up the whole thing, but I'd love to definitely touch base with it, because I think there's a lot we've learned in the last year, and we can enlighten people on the process and how much money it can save reefers. I know reefing can tend to be somewhat of a money pit sometimes, depending on how big your tank is, depending on what you like to keep in your aquarium. If you're an SPS dominated aquarium, they can get quite expensive to maintain properly. And we've been, one of the things I've always had a goal with ACI was how can we do this as efficiently and as cost effectively as possible, but do it right. And the method we've been working on for the last year has been, I mean, blows my mind what we've been able to do. I'm hoping in this one video you're going to show Keith this.
Should I show you want me to show the SPS video now, or you want to? We want to get into.
I think we should do that down a little bit after we're done talking about some pH. But what I'm getting at is if she got the Pink Panther acro in that video. I unfortunately lost our Pink Panther acro back in June. I lost both my colonies, and it was to a very, very it was me being complacent, and all reefers get complacent, but I suggest that you always double check and triple check and quadruple check everything you're doing all the time, because I had a 30-year-old hydrometer that was scientifically calibrated, and I used that thing for probably 5 years for my checking my salinity, and I allowed employees to start using it as well, and that was the biggest mistake I made, because it just so happened it got broken. After 5 years of me using it, it didn't, and it was a floating hydrometer. Most people say, why do you use that? Well, a scientifically calibrated one, if your temperature in your system is what it's calibrated for, those things are spot on if you have a good one. And well, it got broken, and I lost a bunch of really nice colonies because I used a brand new one that was purchased to replace it. And being complacent, like I said, I never checked it. And I figured, I don't know why I didn't. Maybe it was just because of all the rat race of running the business and everything. But for a few months, I was noticing some weird things happening in my systems. And it turned out that the hydrometer was so far off that I was running my salt level at 31.2 ppt. And it made me sick when I figured out what I did wrong and why I was having all these issues. And I lost some amazing corals. But luckily, we're just talking about Jake. Jake was infatuated with that coral when he came to my farm for the first time in a long time. I think he did a video on it. And I gave him a piece of it, and he gave it right back. And I'm so happy to have that coral back in my possession, because I didn't think I'd get it back, because I reached out to the whole network of people that purchased the first release of it. Back was January of last year. And most people had just sold it off. Nobody had a big enough piece to send me a piece of it. And I got it back now, and it was a little nub like this big that Jake gave me, and it's like a nice table now. So it'll be back in the market probably, hopefully in the springtime. I think in about 3 or 4 months I should be able to get a good 70 to 100 frags off the colony, which would be nice.
Wow,
yeah.
That's pretty sick.
Growth is insane with the boosted pH. So people want to talk about pH. Any questions in particular?
Well, I think just the general topic of pH, but maybe why don't you just give a quick summary in terms of what you guys have done in terms of pH and the Kalkwasser method and all that stuff. I know a lot of folks that are tuning in probably know most of this stuff, but maybe a lot of folks don't know what's going on with the what you're doing with the Kalkwasser and the pH. So maybe just kind of give some broad strokes in terms of the methodology, and then we can kind of dig into it a little bit more.
I'll start off right from the whole reason why I even looked at it was being in Florida here. It's kind of a bonus having a farm, because we are in an open air environment. We don't have climate control in the farm. And I would have never in my wildest dreams figured that we would have a suppressed pH in our systems. And
what would you define as a suppressed pH for your systems? What was the range before you made this change?
Oh, it would go down as low as 7.7, and only as high as like 8.15. And anything below 8.25 is suppressed, in my opinion, because the ocean really doesn't change a whole lot. And the natural seawater's world ocean average is about 8.3. It used to be, and we all know because of the CO2 emissions and everything that we do have a suppressed pH in the ocean now, which is usually around 8.25. From what the last I heard, I could be wrong about that, but I know that I always like to thrive for an 8.25 pH or above. And I tried Kalkwasser years ago, and I couldn't get it to work because I was just constantly diluting my systems, and I was chasing my salinity then. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. So I stopped doing it. I just went back to the normal, the methods that I was using, which was in most of my systems a calcium reactor, which doesn't help, especially when you were running what we were running for the longest time. I mean, we were running 2 liters per minute at a 6.5 pH through my calcium reactors. But luckily, one of the things that I've been called a lot is a problem solver. And, I always try to fix things that are broken. And, so, when you run a calcium reactor, Keith, so you understand where I'm coming from here. When you have a pH, especially at 2 liters a minute coming out of your calcium reactor at a 6.5 pH, it doesn't take long to start suppressing the entire 2,200 gallon system. So with the calcium reactors, they were just running right into my drain lines to help to maybe dissipate some of that CO2 off. But what we ended up doing was running the effluent of the calcium reactor all the way into the top of the protein skimmer, and then ran a hard line down into the water column of the protein skimmer. So that way the protein skimmers could scrub off the CO2. And
I on your advice, I basically copied your methodology, but I tried to do that in terms of my protein skimmer, and I ran the tube down through the lid on the skimmer down into the bottom, but it was it impacted the skimming, and so I don't think it was. It was not skimming like it had been before. So I basically now dripping the effluent right in front of the intake of the pump. It's on the outside of my skimmer. So it's probably just dependent in terms of what kind of skimmer you have. And
well, we have these big commercial skimmers. You've seen them, and I can understand where that might be something I never thought about for hobbyists that I'm telling to do this. There's always a way. I mean, my method, because of the scale that we're on, is probably not going to work for a lot of hobbyists because of the equipment sizes. But
right.
Like what you did, you solved the problem. You put it on, and that's exactly what I had another hobbyist that reached out to me to try to get his pH up, and he couldn't do what I recommended. So he said, well, why can't I just run it into the intake of the pump feeding the skimmer? And I said, that'll work exactly the same. Just so it's not going throughout your system with that suppressed pH, because what a lot of people don't know is people talk about putting a CO2 scrubber on their tank, and I'm just like, what most people don't realize is your protein skimmer is your CO2 scrubber. It does not add oxygen to your water. It's been proven. I've had the labs out here with their O2 sensors and reading with a protein skimmer on and without a protein skimmer on, and the oxygen levels were no different. What was different was the CO2. When we turned on the protein skimmers and let them run for a half an hour and then check the CO2 levels, they had been reduced significantly. And so that's something that is very important. I think that people need to know is, don't think your protein skimmer is going to add oxygen to your water. It's not. It's just going to scrub the CO2 out of your water, which is going to help with your pH. So it's very important to have a protein skimmer on your tank, even if you don't need it to remove your nutrients, because you can open up your protein skimmers. Like we have big gate valves on ours with 2-inch lines running out of it. On smaller skimmers, honestly, I don't know much about them, if they have gate valves or what they do to build the water volume in the body of the skimmer. But you could actually just open that up completely so that the water level is as low as possible. You'll still do some skimming, but it'll be such a dry skimmate, and you'll remove very little of the nutrients unless it builds up on the walls of the skimmer. But it's very important to have a protein skimmer on your tank just for the CO2 scrubbing aspect of it, even if you don't need it to remove nutrients. So we had such a suppressed pH that I knew it was a big part of the reason why my calcium reactor had to be run so hard. I mean, we were melting 20 kilos of 2 little fishes reborn every month to a month and a half, 2 20-pound bottles of CO2. Again, 20 liters or 2 liters a minute going through the reactor. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And I talked to Julian Sprung, and he's just like, you're doing that much, and I'm like, yeah. And nobody could really come up with a good solution to my problem. The only thing that I could come up with is I needed a bigger calcium reactor. And I'm like, but wait a minute, this thing's rated for 5,000 gallons. Why am I going to put a bigger calcium reactor on the system? It's only 2,200 gallons. Yeah. So then, I had to start looking into why is my pH so suppressed. And I came up with the only thing that makes any sense to me and to all the scientists and biologists. And I have a friend who's a physicist who runs reef labs. I mean, all these people are just like, I don't know. I mean, it's got to be the biomass in your system. You have 2,200 gallon systems, but who has this much damn coral in a system that big? Square inches, there's not a square inch in my tank that doesn't have corals. You saw it. I mean, my sunks are full. The walls are full.
Wall to wall. Hey, so, we got Jake in the house here. So what's happened there, Jake?
So it was.
Oh, by the way, Jake, I don't know if you missed it, but Chris was talking about you did him a solid with the Pig Panther frag.
He did, man. That's the Reefers Code, man, and I respect that more than anything. That's something that Jake and I have a good thing going back and forth with. He's got pieces of stuff that if I lose it, he'll send it back, and vice versa. It's how it used to be back in the day when I first started reefing. It was trade this, trade that. That way, if mine dies, we can get it back.
You need a bank. You need a bank.
Exactly.
You need a bank.
Exactly.
Hey, Mike Johnson, thank you very much for that super chat. Their comment is, thanks for all the great streams. Happy holidays all. Yes. Same to you all as well.
Same to you. Yes. So the biomass was my problem. And I attribute that to the addiction that I have for more and more corals. And, my coral bank our coral bank, I should say, is becoming quite large. I really can't wait to hear what Amanda's got to say when she's done doing inventory of the farm on Monday, because I know 2 years ago, we did inventory. There was 1,350 different color morphs. There's a lot of the same species, but different color morphs and different types of coral on the farm. And that was 2 years ago. So the farm is now quadrupled in size, and it's getting pretty full. So I keep putting pieces back every shipment. So the biomass isn't going to change. And
I think you need a bigger boat there, Chris.
Well, it's been in the works for a long time. It's not easy to find what I need here in Florida to build the facility that I want. And I found the right piece of land, but now it's just not going to happen because the lady, her kids took over, and she offered it to me when it was a very bad time in my business. We had just moved into the farm, and I signed a lease, and I'm like, I can't purchase a piece of land at the same time. I do have to give her a call though and see if she's still up for it, because if that's the case, it's only a half a mile down the road from where I am right now.
That's a hot skip and a jump.
It would be amazing. I mean, it's 5 acres to build a 30,000 square foot farm, not wholesale, just farm.
Wow.
Is what I want.
Wow.
And it's still not going to be big enough, Keith. I mean, really, it isn't. Problem is I need to find enough people that can actually help me manage and run the place. I mean, we've only got 5 people running ACI right now, and we manage, we get by. But if I had a few more people that had the kind of passion that I have, I've got a great crew right now. Don't get me wrong. I love my crew. They do an amazing job. They're loyal. They show up to work. But I need somebody that has more experience, especially with, if you can keep an SPS coral, you should be able to keep most other corals as well. Unfortunately, for my case, I can't keep soft corals. I don't know why, but it is what it is. But yeah, that would be an amazing accomplishment for the whole kind of legacy of ACI and how it began from the little $10,000 loan from the Discover card to where we are today.
That's amazing, man. That's awesome. Hey, just want to shout out to Jake. Thanks, man, for the super chat. His comment is, talk more about the Reefers Code. So we'll have to talk about that.
Definitely have to touch base on the Reefers Code, because it is something that has been forgotten in this industry. And Jake and I talk about it. I mean, we don't really talk about it, but we talk about it. It's not like we're not like flat out come out and saying Reefers Code. It's, hey, I'm going to hook you up with this, and I know what that means when I talk to Jake. If he's going to hook me up with a piece of coral, it's because he loves that coral, and it might not be the most attractive coral in the world, but he knows I have it. I'll take care of it, and he's going to as well. And if something weird happens to one of us, we can give it back to each other. And
Yeah.
that's a very important part of reefing that has, unfortunately, somewhat, not all,
Gone by
not
the
in all
wayside
cases.
a little bit. Yeah.
It has. So back to the whole pH thing, it's with Kalkwasser, it's a very simple, easy process. It doesn't have to be difficult. And I want to clear something up right here before we continue. I keep saying boost your pH. I mean boost your suppressed pH. I guess I should have worded it differently. I've had some people telling me that they're boosting their pH to like 9.2, and I'm like, what are you, crazy? I'm like, you're playing with fire. I got people telling me they're dosing caulk slurry. Well, that's playing with fire. It might work for a while, but you're going to have a crash. It's going to be a bad crash. You're going to lose everything.
Why is
I've seen it.
Why is that, Chris?
Well, because undissolved caulk
it's too potent. It's too potent. Is that why?
No, not at all. It's you can only dissolve so much Kalkwasser in RO water. It's a divalent cation, which makes it very insoluble in water. I also use monovalent cations like potassium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide, but I don't recommend anybody do that on a hobbyist level. You don't need to. On my level with ACI, because of the biomass and the water volume we're using, we're talking 1 drop every 3 seconds. I think I mentioned this on the last time we did the chat, and I had some people telling me, "Oh, I'm dosing caulk slurry now, and it's boosting my pH to 9.2." I said, "Playing with fire. I want nothing to do with it," and I didn't talk to the guy anymore. I don't know how his tank's doing now. I hope he's okay. I hope he didn't run into problems. But if you send a caulk slurry through your doser, and all you're doing is putting undissolved Kalkwasser into your water or into your aquarium. So what that ends up doing is binding up in all the pores and crevices of your rock. It can clump in low water volume or low water flow areas, and it's going to eventually start to dissolve, and it's going to be a major headache and a major issue, or it's going to completely bind up your rock to make it basically worthless for what it's meant to be there for. And I had one person that did mention to me that he was doing the slurry thing and he regretted ever doing it. I told him not to. He did it, and he did have a full tank crash. He lost every SPS coral in his aquarium. The only thing that lived out of the whole batch was zoanthids. And it's very unfortunate. And now he listens to everything I say exactly to the T, because you can boost your suppressed pH by just using Kalkwasser if you put it on a dosing pump and you dose it at nighttime opposite of your photo period. And you need to be able to dose exactly what your water or your system evaporates on a daily basis. And you want that all to go in your tank at nighttime. Everybody says, "Well, what about my salinity? It's going to fall." In the wild, the salinity is not consistent in every aspect of every reef environment. You have rivers flowing in, you have rain hitting them. I mean, there's so many different, that tiny little bit of fluctuation in your pH when you dose your full evaporation amount overnight, during the day, it catches up.
I mean, as long as you can kind of just repeat that pattern day after day after day. Consistency, right? Steady as a rock, whether it's a spike here or there and whatever parameter. As long as you're repeating it, then the tank is going to be fine.
Exactly, and the corals won't care. They don't care at all. I mean, the corals can go through so much more than what people think they can go through, especially after the dive I had in Bali when I dove down to like 30 feet of water to see these monster heads of Goniopora growing. And it was like, I swear it felt like it was only 70-degree water down there. And when I got back to the surface, it was like, ooh, it was like 80 degrees, So, temperature swings, honestly, it's a myth, in my opinion. Acclimating corals is a myth, in my opinion. It's not necessary.
Say that again. So acclimating corals, are you talking about SPS, no need to acclimate a new frag or coral to the conditions of the tank it's going into?
No need. Perfect example is I bring in thousands of corals sometimes on a weekly basis. If I had to sit down and acclimate every single one of those corals, it'd be a 24-hour process. I'd have to figure out some way to make this huge monster vat to be able to do all this acclimation. And I stumbled across this about 14 years ago in my garage when I had ACI in my garage in its infancy. I had some, when I was importing corals, I was a hobbyist before, and our first import, we set up these huge, cement mixing vats that you buy at Lowe's, the black ones, and we had iodine dips going, and every coral came out of the bag that we imported and went into an iodine dip, and we had a lot of losses in the very beginning, and it was. I attribute it to the acclimation process. The coral is already stressed. It doesn't need to go through any more stress. It needs to be taken out of that garbage water that it's in and put right into your aquarium in a system that is healthy and that is, stable. And I have people ask me why I take a coral from this system to that system on the wild side. Like I have my 2 wild import systems. I'll take a coral from this tank and I'll put it in the other system, and I won't acclimate anything. And when I had walk-ins coming in, customers like, "Why are you doing that?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? Why am I doing that?" I'm like, "I don't know. That's second nature to me."
That's LPS too.
LPS, SPS, it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, Jake will even contribute to that. I mean, it's a myth. You don't acclimate your corals.
Yeah, he's talked about that. So not even temperature, not even if.
No.
Interesting.
Not at all. I mean, the reason why I know for a fact that it's not something that is an issue is because of importing. I get shipments in that are in the wintertime, and we got a 4-hour drive back from Miami. Yeah, we have a climate controlled van, but it sits in Miami for 5 hours, 6 hours. And I remember when it was freezing temperatures in Miami the one time, and I got back with a shipment. This was January 10th, 2010. We had 13 straight nights of frost here in Plant City. In Miami, I drove down and there was frost on Alligator Alley, and the alligators were piled on top of each other, trying to get that every bit of sunlight they could get to warm up. But when I got back with that shipment, we checked the temperature. It was 68 degrees, and that's on the cooler side. Most of our shipments come in. Our guys are so good that the temperature is usually in the mid 70s, never in the 80s, but sometimes in the 60s, and I just took those corals straight out of that cold water and put them straight into my system, and they react really well to it. And when I stopped doing the acclimation, it was a freak thing that happened. I was in the middle of unpacking a shipment. Something happened. I had to leave. So I said, let's just get all the corals out and get them in the system. And we did. And my DOAs were less. And I'm like, So I'm putting these things through this dip method to prevent DOAs, and all I'm doing is stressing them out more. I lost more corals. So I stopped doing the dip, except for on certain corals that I was always so nervous about. And then when I realized that they didn't even need that, I gave up on acclimating corals all around. And I said, I tell everybody, don't acclimate your corals. If you get them from here, if you want to do a dip on them, I respect that. But take water from your system, take the corals out of my water, put them directly into your water and add your dip, go through the process, put them straight back into your system or into your quarantine system, and you will have better success. The corals won't stress as much.
Yeah, Jake, a couple comments here. Jake is saying corals are self-acclimating organisms, and Patrick Jewell is saying corals live in tide pools and experience huge shifts in temperature and pH.
Exactly. I mean, in a lagoon, when you have the tide going out and that lagoon is at the shallowest point and the waves are crashing over the crest and that little bit of water from the open ocean's coming into that lagoon, well, that lagoon could only be 4 feet deep, 3-4 feet deep. I mean, the sun's very powerful, as we all know, and that water warms up quite quickly. And I've been in lagoons over in Bali that, you walk into them and it's like, wow, I can't believe how warm the water is. And it is what it is.
So, all right, man, let's get back to this pH conversation, because I see some comments in here, and one of these comments from Wall Street Bets. That's an interesting screen name. The comment is, I just run my caulk reactor in line with my ATO, so it's dosing about 5 gallons a day almost. So let's talk about that, man, because I was doing that. I was running a caulk reactor, and I had it in line with my ATO, and you, Chris, said, I got a much better way for you, my friend. And that way was essentially using a drum, right? Not stirring the caulk wasser in that drum, and just having it fed by a doser into the tank. So it was not in line with the ATO. And what you told me is that that's really diluting the kalkwasser solution if you have it in line with your ATO, correct?
It is. It is. Your kalkwasser solution that you have that's in the mixing vessel that you're using, like I said earlier, only so much kalkwasser will dissolve in water, and then you'll have settlement. So I understand the concept of a calc stirrer. I just don't believe in it, because there's too many possibilities for variables to mess up the process. Because if you have water from your ATO going into your, or from your caulk stirrer going into your, for auto top off, and then you have a feed line feeding that caulk stirrer, and your caulk stirrer doesn't stir every 10, 15, 20 minutes, which then, and I'll get into the reason why you don't want that to happen as well, you're diluting your kalkwasser, because what's settled at the bottom is not being stirred up into the column again to dissolve and maximum concentrate that RO water. So the easiest way to dose kalkwasser, Keith, you can back me up on this. I know Jake and I still go back and forth a little bit on it, but I'm a firm believer that you take your mixing vessel and you read the directions of the kalkwasser that you're using. I only use one brand. It's Reef Blueprints by Captivate Aquaculture. I know where it comes from. I know how the meticulous testing that is done to make sure it's as pure as possible. It's not food grade. It's not pharmaceutical grade. It's farther above that because of the impurities that you can find in kalkwasser. And we can get into that more then too. But if you mix up kalkwasser, and the instructions on the kalkwasser tell you how many grams can be dissolved in 1 gallon of water completely at maximum concentration. If you put that many grams in that 1 gallon of water, stir it up and let it dissolve and let it settle down, you might get a tiny bit of settlement. Your pH should read at between 12.4 and 12.44. That's the maximum you could ever get pH value out of a kalkwasser solution. Anybody telling you they're getting higher than that, their pH pen is wrong, 100% wrong, because that is one thing that is consistent and it doesn't lie. And so we have our 55-gallon barrels that we mix up our kalkwasser, and we have to top them off twice a week. We have about 12 to 15 gallons of evaporation on a daily basis. Summertime, it's about 8 gallons. So what we do is I have a 2-cup measuring cup. It measures out. I weighed it all out to how many grams would dissolve in 55 gallons of water, and I put a mark on the measuring cup. It's at the 300 ml line, and I dump that amount of kalkwasser into the mixing vessel.
So that's what the amount of kalkwasser you need to be saturated in that solution. That amount of solution. Correct. Right.
Correct. So when I put that in there, we stir it really good. Of course, it gets all milky, and then eventually just runs clear. I always add an extra 100 mLs just because I don't mind the settlement at the bottom, because I know then as it builds that it's one less step about every fourth fill up that we won't have to go through and add more kalkwasser to it. So we can just top them off, stir them up, check the pH. If the pH is where it needs to be, seal it up and go. So
so you just said, you mentioned seal it up. And
yes.
When I was at your farm, you had this, it was like a plastic, not a plastic bag.
A fish bag.
Fish bag on top of the drum. And that was basically to prevent any air from getting inside, because that could, react with the kalkwasser.
Exactly. So when you have a calc stirrers are great for this aspect of it, the fact that they're sealed. But they're not great when it comes down to the fact that they continuously have water coming into them. And depending upon when the stirring is being done, it can, for one, you could be dosing undissolved kalkwasser into your system because your system's calling for water if you're doing it on an auto top off type deal. So to prevent ever having any undissolved kalkwasser going into our systems, we do it this way with the 55-gallon barrel. Oh, with the 55-gallon barrel.
See, Amanda threw you there.
did throw me there, but she made a great point. I'm a fidgeter.
Oh, you're fidgeting with your glasses there.
Playing with
Okay.
my glasses, so she's like, stop.
All right, that's a good tip.
So the reason we use the barrels and then dissolve the calc washer once is so that we don't have to worry about the undissolved calc washer getting, for one, clogging up your dosing pump, and two, being dosed into your system, which is a accident waiting to happen down the road. And this way we also then can take I have my calc washer being pulled from the surface of the barrel. So at the full level, we have a styrofoam float. I put PVC legs in it so that if there is caulk sludge at the bottom, that if I do dose more than normal before we do a top off, that float will then stand on the bottom and not allow my effluent line to dip into the settlement at the bottom.
Yeah, you know what I'm using? I have like these, basically I have my my tubing, rigid tubing hooked up to PVC pipe inside the barrel. And so I actually have 4 lines, 2 going to one tank, one system, and 2 going to another system. And I zip tied the, you know, those 1/4 inch, you know, tubing to the PVC, right, like 4 inches from the bottom. So it's
another way to do
it. It'll never get into the you know, the sediment. But yeah,
you know, that's another way to do it. That works just as good. The reason I didn't do it that way was because exactly the reason what I'm going to tell you here with I have one system that I have that it literally I only dose about 7 gallons in the wintertime, and it's about 4 gallons at nighttime or in the summertime. So I have a smaller mixing vessel on that, and I bought this this RV potable water storage container, and that's what I use. And there's only a small hole, so I can't put the float down inside. So I put exactly like you did, about 4 inches above a PVC pipe. It runs down through the PVC pipe, comes out, so I don't have to worry about it. But I'm not doing it all the time, and my employees are very good about it. But there's times when they miss that it is not in the right place.
Yeah,
and you know, so with the float, it's pretty much foolproof. You can't really mess that up because it's floating. As long as the PVC pipe doesn't fall out of the float, you know, and sinks at the bottom, we're good. We're in good shape. So it just helped make sure that it kept things easier for employees that are busy, and I understand that. And you know, sometimes again, everybody gets complacent at times, and it's one thing most people don't get complacent with me on is because they know how anal I am about my coral systems and about everything that goes into them, and they don't want to make me mad.
No, they don't want to mess with you, Chris, about that stuff. No, for sure.
About the animals, man. It's all about the animals. That's what I always tell them. Don't take this.
Yeah, no, that's, you know, that's your livelihood, dude. So how often are you measuring the pH inside of the drums?
I don't measure the pH except for when we top them off. And with you know what I've been doing as before I stopped measuring the pH every day. I mean, it got so just another thing to do, and was basically waste of time because, you know, when you have the seal at the top, the reason for that seal at the top is to allow you to allow air in so that you're not, you know, having a vacuum inside as the effluent leaves, but not. It's there to not allow air to just exchange over that water, that effluent all the time.
Because so I basically have, you know, a polyurethane 30-gallon drum, and I got a polyurethane, you know, the top on top of that drum, and that's it, you know. So do you think I
should be fine?
I should be
as
fine,
long
right?
as you have. Well, what I always say is the hole that you have your effluent lines coming out, make sure it's tight as you can make it, but it's still going to be loose enough where there will be air going in as water's displaced.
I actually have John Guest fittings set up on that, so it's pretty airtight. Yeah.
Well, so you don't have any problems with the doser not being able to pull it, or there's obviously air.
No, it's been more
somewhere.
I found that the elbow was a problem, so I stopped using elbows, and I have a straight John Guest going into it, and just, you know, that rigid tubing just kind of flexes around, bends around a little bit, and it works fine.
But the top that you have that goes onto it, it just kind of sits down over top of it. So it's not like a rubber seal keeping it sealed up.
There's no rubber seal.
That's allowing the air into it. So as that air goes in, if you ever notice on the top of your calc effluent, there's like a little film. And it's like crispy.
Yeah.
It's like crispy.
Yeah.
That's actually the kalkwasser working with the atmosphere, and it's creating carbonates. So that's a little thin sheet of carbonates on the surface, and the thicker means you need to figure out a way to seal it up a little bit more. I have one that's so paper thin you can still see right through it and see right to the bottom, but if you touch it, you can tell
Maybe I should put some weight on the lid or something.
Why, do you have a pretty thick? You have a pretty thick.
It's. I'd have to go check it, but I mean, it's definitely there. I don't know if it's something that easily, you can
take a picture. I can tell you if it's a problem. If you should try to let less air in, but I doubt it because you're really just letting air in. It's not like there's air going in and out of that thing all day long, unless you're dosing. So, but that's important. To keep your holding vessel for your kalkwasser drip or dosing. Keep it as sealed as you can, but you can't seal it completely unless you're using a kalk stirrer. Kalk stirrers can be utilized with my method, but it's going to be hard on the dosing pump pulling through something that is sealed completely. It's going to eventually not work. And you'll have to let air into it.
What about, Chris? We talked about this before. Maybe it was not during a live stream, but in terms of the sediment, how long can you have the sediment in there before you really need to swap that out and get it out? And, in terms of impurities, right? We don't want to be concerned about having impurities going in, via the kalkwasser sediment. So how often do you swap out that sediment or vacuum it out, let's say?
Well, since I know exactly the grading of the calcium hydroxide that we're using, it's Chris buys USP and above grade, and depending on where he's getting it from, sometimes the higher grade, which is more pure, is not much different in price, and he always goes with the best to make sure that he's not having to adjust pricing all the time. So I know that for a fact that what I'm getting is high quality calcium hydroxide. Now there's 2 grades above, but the cost of those, because they're purified, is just ridiculous. I mean, it would be so expensive for me to use it, but I'd be getting the purest form of calcium hydroxide that I could get my hands on. But again, quadruple the cost. It doesn't make sense if I can, like you're saying, the impurities are going to be there in every grade except for the highest grade,
which is not cost effective.
Right. The lower grades, yeah, you can go and buy pickling lime for a 50-pound sack for $30 somewhere. I don't recommend you do that. And here's the reason why. Because you have one of the big things we found in kalkwasser is aluminum. It's very, very prevalent in lower grades, especially. It also has, what was it? The lower grades have a lot of cesium in, and a lot of people don't know what cesium is, and we can talk about that more here in the chat. But cesium is a mildly radioactive contaminant in sodium-based salts, as well as it's found in a handful of other things that can be raw materials that we use for our aquariums. If the raw material is lower grade, there's levels of all of these things are going to be higher than what you want them to be. The other thing we found out with lower grades of calcium hydroxide, when we finally did reach maximum concentration of the water, I said, okay, we know this is inferior quality. We know we're going to have aluminum in here. We're at maximum concentration, so we should have equivalent calcium readings to a maximum concentration of a higher grade, right? And my buddy Gene, the physicist, he's like, we should. He's like, let's take a sample and test it. So take it to the lab. He sits it through the ICP machine, and I couldn't believe what I saw. My first test with a high grade was 920 ppm of calcium. This lower grade, even though it was maximum concentrated in my water, was only at 680. So with lower the grade, the less calcium, the more aluminum, the more impurities. So what you're getting at is how often do we clean out our mixing vessels? Because I know that what I'm getting, I only do it about once every 3 months. And because I've got 6 55-gallon barrels to take out and clean out, it's a project, especially since we've kept expanding the farm and we've kind of expanded around them. So getting the vessels out is kind of a pain in the rear end. So we make sure we do it about every 3 months. So, and usually there's not a whole lot left in the bottom anyhow, but we try to make sure that we're not continuously dumping in more and more. So we have this big, thick sludge at the bottom, because all that is going to do is just continue to build and build and build. The impurities are going to probably settle mostly at the bottom, depending on the weight of them. But as long as you are aware that the settlement in your calc washer that you're using is actually, if it's of the right grading, it's still calc washer. It just didn't dissolve, and you can just continue to add water to that as you're topping it off until it completely dissolves, or you just have a minor amount of settlement, and then that's something you probably just want to dump if you haven't added any and you filled up your vessel 2 times, 3 times, whatever settling at the bottom there's probably not good. So you eliminate it. You eliminate that by just cleaning it out, and just be mindful. Don't buy your raw materials by the price. That's the worst thing you can do. These animals don't deserve cheap. They deserve the best we can give them. We took them from the ocean. Let's make them thrive. Let's not make them survive.
I'm an advocate for spending on quality equipment and spending on quality stuff that you're putting into the tank. Yeah, you don't want to cheap out on that stuff.
Definitely not.
So first of all, thank you, Peter T, for that super chat. Always appreciate Chris's insight. Is the comment. I've seen a couple. I've seen a couple of folks talk about slurry again here, Chris, and I think that and I don't know if you know if you've been following Telegram. I know he has been doing the slurry method, and I think they actually had a live stream that talked about it. His comment is, I understand the slurry hesitation, but it's possible 4% and below 6 months, and simple process and consistent. That's his comment. I guess we could have a whole back and forth debate in terms of whether or not slurry is.
It's exactly what is the problem. It is consistent, and it will get to a saturation point where your tank can't handle it anymore, and it is just going to go. I promise you that. I've talked to physicists. I've talked to Chris Wood, the marine scientist behind Captivate Aquaculture, who's been my mentor for 15 years. It's not a good idea. Don't continue. I promise you, it's going to be a problem down the road. Major water changes might slow that process down, but it's a recipe for disaster. I'm listening to the people that I trust 100%, and that's my friend Gene and Chris, because they're both educated on this way more than I am, and I do a lot of experimenting for them and help them in many ways. We all work together extremely well, and we've all came to the consensus immediately when I heard about people doing caulk slurry. They're playing with fire.
I mean, just what you talked about before earlier, in the sense of running that stuff through a doser, or it actually getting into the system, into the sump, into maybe return pumps. I admit I do not know the ins and outs of the slurry method, but just on the surface, to me, there seems like there are risks with dosing caulk washer that way.
No, there's risk with dosing any hydroxide. Hydroxides in general can be very dangerous. It's calcium hydroxide. It's one of the weakest hydroxides that are out there. At maximum concentration, you can stick your hand in it, and you're not going to have to worry about your flesh melting off of your skin. If I put my hand in my max concentrated sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide, that's not the smartest thing in the world you can do. It's so basic that it'll just melt your skin.
I had a little cut on my finger today, and I was swapping out the caulk washer today. Man, that hurt, dude. That was an open wound too, man. That stung a lot.
I got 1/3 concentration potassium on my thumb, being just ridiculously dumb about it, not thinking, just thinking, oh, I can do this really cautiously and gently, and I got it on my finger. Didn't even realize it was on my finger until, I don't know, probably a few minutes later. And I started feeling this weird tingling sensation in my finger, and I stuck my hand right in the water and started rubbing my fingers. My thumb stayed cracked and dry for almost a month and a half. And literally, I think I fixed my problem, and the next thing you know, I'd get this big, huge split down the middle of my thumb. It would start bleeding, and just the pain that I went through. And that was the hydroxides just eating away at me continuously, and just learned my lesson the hard way. So I suggest, if you're doing the caulk story, please reconsider it. Don't learn the hard way, because these animals are too precious. And if you got some stuff that you're prized and you love, and you might not be able to get your hands on again, there might be a day that comes where you won't have it anymore. And it is a recipe for disaster in the long run. And it's different in every system. And just like what we're doing is different than what anybody else is doing, because our systems aren't your systems. Every system is going to have a different reaction to everything that you do to it. I can give you a baseline on how to do things. It's up to the reefer to think about how to fix it, or consult me. I'm happy to help you through any issues with what I'm telling people how to do, because again, like I said, your system's different. It might be a completely different process on dosing hydroxides. And with most people that are doing kalkwasser that I've taught how to do it my way, they're just like, what? I mean, the growth is insane. I mean, this one guy, Jay, I started him up on it back in February, and he had acros, some crazy weird name. I don't remember what the name of it was. It was a nub.
There's a lot of weird names out there, Chris.
I could go on for hours about that. And unfortunately, being a farmer, I got to come up with a name for every single one of mine. And I'm just like, we're calling this one Mike the Mycedium, because I don't feel like figuring out what it is. But everybody can know its name is Mike, and it's a Mycedium.
I understand that. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you give it a first name, and the last name it's a scientific name.
Well, what we're trying to figure out, because one of my employees, AJ, he really liked this one acro, and he's like, Chris, do we have this on the farm? And I'm like, it's a chop shop frag. I'm like, I don't think we have it on the farm. I said, if you think it's a nice piece to put on the farm, I said, put it aside. He's like, well, what are we going to name it? And I'm like, it's AJ the acro. And he's like, huh? So I named him.
Amanda's just she's like AJ. Ripping those glasses out of your hands there.
But yeah, I mean, the name game is a pain
in the butt. That's a whole nother.
Jay showed me photos after he started doing the pH that his was very suppressed, like 7.6. And when I started doing him on the kalkwasser, he was freaking out because it took him a while to get his system to acclimate to the kalkwasser and the pH, and to stabilize everything to the point where he could back off his kalkwasser dosing at nighttime, so that he wasn't continuously dosing during the photo period as well, which was then saturating his water with the method and the way I do it. But in 4 months' time, his little nub that he had for a year that was encrusting just a tiny little bit turned into a beautiful little miniature colony in 4 months. And he's just like, I'm blown away. He's like, I've only spent like $40 on my tank in the last 4 months, where I was spending about $150 a month on my aquarium. I'm like, good. That's exactly what the point of this is, to make your corals happier, save you money, and just make reefing easier than what it already is.
That is a good thing to shoot for. All right, man. So we've been talking a lot about pH, and it is a very interesting topic, and I've learned a lot listening to you, Chris, talking about it, and I know a lot of folks out there appreciate it. Let's how about shifting gears a little bit? So when I was down on the farm back in April, I think I was down there in April, you were playing around with some new LEDs. How's that been going?
I'm really happy with the Coral Cares. I have so many people that say, I can't believe you like that light. That's an ugly light. It doesn't do much. I'm like, man, you guys have no, for my application, for a farming application, they're the simplest lights to use, because with all the dust that comes into my place, and I know it's going into my systems, but it settles on the tops of my darn lights, and I can't stand the dirtiness of it. So the great thing about them, they're basically a street lamp. They're sealed. So we just pull them down, take them out, hose them off, put them back up, let them make sure the plug's dry, plug them back in, and they're good to go. There's only basically 2 channels. It's blue and white. The par value is nothing even close to what my Illumagics it was. But when I replaced, I still love my Illumagics. They're a great light. I just don't like taking photos under them. The corals really respond well to them, and they make the corals look great. But they still weren't doing what I wanted them to do as an LED or as a light source for my wild import.
This is the coral cares?
The coral cares. No, the
Illumagics. Okay.
I'm getting into them. So we decided to put the coral cares up, and I just replaced one of the Illumagics with 2 coral cares. And underneath those corals, I noticed a big difference in the coral's ability to hold color longer than underneath the Illumagics. So we took them down and we put 8 coral cares up over an 8x4 tank. And honestly, I couldn't be happier with the results that we're getting from it, because we have amazing colors, the growth is great, and the polyp extension is unbelievable. But I'm sure the polyp extension has a lot to do with our method in taking care of the corals, the system itself, as well as lighting.
And you have both acros and LPS under the coral cares?
You know, the funny thing about that, no, I don't right now. Only keep my SPS under the coral cares. Actually, in my farm system, I have a lot of euphyllias under coral cares. But I'll get into another scenario that I ran into with strictly LEDs here in just a minute. But the coral cares, the main coral cares are mostly have mostly SPS underneath of them, and I always like to try something new out with SPS corals. If my SPS corals don't like the new change, then I don't want to use that on the rest of my systems, because if I can keep an SPS happy with this light with a lower par value.
What are you talking about par was?
Oh my gosh. I mean, under my Illumagics, we're at 380 on the corals, and under the coral cares, we're at 270.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I have, like, under my halides and my frag tanks, you know, I'm sometimes 250 to 300, 200 low point in terms of under the halides. So, and they're, you know, I got great growth and colors on those corals. So it's not necessarily a par deal, but that's part of it.
I think people need to stop talking about par. In my opinion, par is not something people should be talking about, because your corals are going to tell you if they're happy. Okay. You need to observe your corals, not observe your equipment. And that is one of the things that I think has been a big step backwards with LEDs. And I'm not putting LEDs down in any way. I mean, they're great for people that are techie. They love to do all this different, you know, all fine and good. But for me, I want plug and play. You know, I want to plug it in and make it work. I don't have time to sit and, you know, if I had as many radions up as I had in coral cares, and I had to worry about that programming being slipped out or me having to I would go nuts. I mean, I'd have to have a full-time employee to maintain that stuff, and it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm a metal halide T5 and coral care LED with Reef Brite accents. That's the only LEDs that we really use anymore, or at all now, is the Reef Brites for accents, the coral cares, and a handful of Illumagics that we had purchased, 4 or 5 years ago, and I won't get rid of them because they still work and they work well. But the growth, the color, and everything out of the corals has been phenomenal. And something I did find and notice, I have 4 coral cares over my acro chop shop healing station, for say in my frag tank, and I also heal a lot of acros that are chop shop underneath my metal halides. One of the things I noticed is the growth on the acros under the coral cares is about 25% less under the coral cares as what it is under my metal halides. So if I have acros that I am healing to puddle onto the plug so I can sell them as a chop shop, they're under my metal halides to start, and then we bring them to the frag system where we actually pull the corals from and we put them on a top rack, which is only about 2 inches below the surface of the water. And I measured the par there, and it was about 250 less than what it was under the acros and in my acro where my metal halides are. We're like 650 to 750, as high as 850, depending on the metal halide under my acros on my farm, and where we heal the acros for chop shop. And then it was about 450 underneath the coral care. So I was like, okay, so that's about 25% less light. So is the par really the reason why the metal halides are growing them faster, or is it the fuller spectrum of light that they're getting from the metal halides? And I won't know that unless I could actually get that kind of par reading on my coral cares, but they're amazing lights. I mean, they're simple, they're easy. When we're pulling the corals for our customers, I have them on Reef Crest mode, which is blue and white. It's 100% blue, 100% white for the entire day. If I want to turn the blues on so I can go pull the acros for what you see is what you get order, it's so easy. I just click on each controller, and I have a program set for blue. And the blues make the corals look amazing. I mean, there's a really good royal blue LED in that light.
So Reefkeeper is asking, do you have a built-in schedule with the coral cares, or is it a custom setting?
I just used the built-in schedule, the Reef Crest mode. It came with it because I'm not techie, and I don't want to. I should probably sit down and make. I probably should sit down and make my own program for it, but that'll probably come one day. It's not broken right now, so I'm not going to try and fix something. It's been working so well for us. I'm just going to continue with the way it's going right now, but I'm sure I could come up with a better program for the time period where the lights are on. Everything's been going so good, I just haven't done it.
So are you perhaps thinking of getting more coral cares, or are you what's that? Yeah.
I bought we have they're not all up yet. We have 48 in the warehouse just waiting to go up over the new farm. We just haven't got the new farm in. Once the new farm goes in, there's going to be 48 more coral cares going up. We have 24 right now, so we'll have a total of like 72 coral cares going in our place.
Is this a replacement halide bulb for you, man? I mean, is this gonna
No. And I'll tell you why. I'm glad you said that, because I was so happy with what I was seeing from the coral cares, and I've always loved Tulio's Reef Brite XHO accent strips, and I still love my T5s, always will, never will change, especially after the data that we gotten over the last year with the new farm system.
Quick question, somebody's asking, what T5 bulbs do you run?
ATI Blue Plus, 100%.
Okay.
That's all I use. We buy them. I think we replace 150 to, it's either 150 or 200 every time we replace them, and it's every 9 months. And every time there's a sale, I buy as many as I can get my hands on, and I stockpile them so that we have them, because I'm afraid one day they're not going to allow us to buy the daggone things, and that's going to scare me, because I'm going to get into what I'm thinking right now with your question. Is the coral care the replacement for the metal halide? No. And here's the reason why. Biggest thing that I see as a problem with all LEDs is the claim of UV.
Yeah, we talked about that with Paletta.
There is no UV.
That's what he said. He said Tulio came over, broke out the spectrometer, and there was no UV that was measured.
Okay, so where I'm getting at with this is when I put my new farm system in, and Keith, you saw it, but I don't think there was a whole lot in it back in April. I think we were just starting to put more and more corals into it. I have the coral cares, and I have the XHOs over that. And it was the only system in my entire facility that was strictly LEDs. And it didn't even dawn on me until all these little itty bitty subtle problems started happening. When I was removing, what the first thing that really irritated me badly was the parameters from ICP testing that I get every single week from the farm system I was taking corals from, and fragging them down and making sure that there was no exposed skeleton from the other farm system. The only thing that would possibly be put in would be exposed tissue into the new farm system, was how we were adding corals to it. We were taking big colonies, breaking them down, and making sure that there was nothing that could harbor algae or whatnot. It's not a foolproof plan, but it was without space. I don't have time to QT everything like I want to, but it worked really well, and it has worked still to this day really well without introducing a lot of crazy weird stuff that might come from another system. I took my prize torch collection that was growing under metal halides and T5s for years. And I had some colonies that I grew from a single polyp out to, 7 or 8 polyps. I broke them all down from the main farm in the back, cleaned them, toothbrushed them. We even got the Dremel tool out and made sure that all the algae was, I was so anal about it, moved it all over into the farm, and they were looking amazing under the coral cares and under the Reef Brites. Absolutely amazing. As my as I kept moving more and more over to it, it was about 3 months into it. For no reason, one polyp that I had made a separate tile for to grow into a colony, one polyp would just start, closing up, and I'm going, what the heck is going on? Why is this happening? These corals were thriving in the farm in the back. Now they're starting to shrink up a little bit here. What is this? I'm pulling my hair out. Like, I'm having Gene make sure, calibrate your machine before you do this test, and calibrate it before you do this test. I want to see what you get. I'm like, I'll pay you whatever I got to do. I need to know what's going on in my system. What is in my water that's causing these corals to not do well in here versus the farm at the back? And we couldn't find anything that was a toxin, anything that was just a level that was so far different. We just couldn't find anything. So then I narrowed it down to, okay, maybe it's the flow, because I only had, the main return pumps, and there was only the closed loop underneath for flow, and euphyllias, they were moving pretty good. So I put more gyres in to get even more flow. And then I started losing even more. And I'm going, okay, this is really, really irritating me. These corals are precious. They've been farmed for years, and now they're just dying one by one. Called Tulio. Tulio's like, I know what your problem is.
No UV.
I'll be down. I'll explain when I get there. He came down 2 days later with his computer and his spectrograph and his UVA, UVB, UVC monitors. And he starts going into his thing. Tulio. Tulio can talk. He's probably worse than me.
No, I think, Chris, you might have been part of the record with me, you, and I don't know if the longest stream was the three of us with Jake, or yeah, I think so.
It was you, me, and Jake. Then it was me. Then it was Jake. But we got,
by the way, quite a debate going on here in the chat about the UV and all that stuff. But go ahead, I'll get back to that.
Well, when Tulio came down, he measured the UV of every single light that was in my tank, on all my systems. All the metal halides had UV. All the T5s had very minute amounts. It was only like 30 micromoles. And then I went to a specific UV bar that I had that has 5 UV, so-called UV LEDs in them, and we put his meter right up on it, and there was 0 UV. So we went around to the other LEDs, and the Illumagics had, I think it was 3 micromoles. I'm like, what is that?
Doesn't sound a lot. Like, it's pretty.
Down 2 inches below it, and it was 0. But you put on the halide, we put the sensor under the water, and we had, it was 50 to 60 micromoles of UV in pretty much the lowest points inside the aquarium. And even with the T5 only areas, there was, 15, 20 micromoles of UV, and that was UVB, UVC. There was no UVA on any of them. Just nothing produces it, enough. Well, actually, the metal halides up close had some UVA. So Tulio's like, I know your problem. Look at the algae in your tank in this system, and look at the algae growing in your other systems. And I noticed this too. I had this weird, dark, almost black, velvety type algae growing in the tank and the system that was strictly LEDs. And now, granted, this tank was set up from scratch, cycled, and all LEDs, never had a metal halide or T5 over it. It was a brand new system. So this black algae was really weird to me. And even when I took it out and looked at it under a microscope, it was just looked like most of the other algae that were there. I ended up taking a couple of my torches. Tulio asked me to do this. He's like, take one of your torches that's not looking happy right now and move it back where it used to be, where you knew it was thriving. So I did. And the next day I came in and it was like, wide open, flapping in the current. The black algae was like turning like a tan, like a darker,
wow.
Not a tan, turning like a brownish color. And the next day, the black algae was gone. So that made me put metal halides up over all my systems, LEDs. It's hybrid systems for everything. Metal halide, T5, LED. You can't just use LEDs. In the long run, it can be detrimental to aquariums.
Yeah.
Sanjay's a perfect example.
Yeah, I mean, Paletta talked about this. I guess he.
I wish I listened.
Well, you could still like listen to it, dude. You could go
through.
Well, you got 2 weeks off now. You got plenty of time to listen to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, he talked about adding halides to his LEDs because of the lack of UV in the LEDs, and just a couple of comments here. Telegram is saying some LEDs do have UV. Kessel and GHL absolutely offer sub 400 nanometers. I mean, I could speak to the GHL because
sure.
I could speak to the GHL because I'm running 6 of those fixtures, the Mitras, over my Peninsula tank. And you know me, dude. I mean, I am a metal halide guy, T5 through and through. So this is my first venture into LEDs, and you know, like 6 months in terms of like having corals in that tank, I'm really very, very pleased. I'm getting some great colors and some great growth under those lights. So
don't change what's not broken.
Right.
You know, I mean, we were looking at it as from an aspect, you know, I mean, I would have never gotten the coral cares if it wouldn't have been for Terrence, the former face of Neptune. He just showed me all of this. Everything he showed me from when he used the Gen 1 coral cares just blew my mind. I'm like, there's no way that they're LEDs. And he still had T5s up. I didn't realize that. I don't think he does anymore at this point in time, but the LEDs are great. But you know, and to Telegram's, he is correct that they have UV. AP9X is the only LED that we did a test on that has any significant amount of UV coming out of it. But here's the problem. It doesn't penetrate into the water. So it's only present in a very short span from the light. And I saw it with my own eyes. I have AP9Xs at my place. Only reason we have them is because we used them at the shows, and we ended up purchasing them, so we just had them all the time. And I ended up putting them up over a small tank in my what you see is what you get room. And I said, let's go check this out because I heard it's got UV. And then Gene, my friend who's the physicist, he ended up buying a spectrograph and, you know, a whole bunch of UV equipment. And he did this whole graph thing on all the LEDs that he has. And he's like, you're right, Chris. He's like, the AP9X is the only one that shows UV, B and C. He's like, but as soon as you go into the water, it disappears. So marketing is always something that you have to take a look for. I mean, and I don't fault any of these manufacturers for putting out there that they have UV, but you know, go deep, go more, dig deeper into it. Give us more details about it, because UV is not all created equal. For one, I mean, you can go to a hospital and use an LED UV to sterilize your hands, but you're only this far away from the LED on the top and the bottom, and you have UV properties of LEDs in there. It's from a distance past 4 inches is where the problems begin with UV and LEDs. And until they make it affordable for somebody to be able to purchase an LED that is strictly UV, that's going to produce enough to penetrate our water, LEDs are never going to be sustainable for corals long term. And the reason being is exactly what happened in my farm system. As soon as I put, okay, I've got 6 coral cares up over that tank. As soon as I put up 4 175 watt 20K bulbs, all my problems disappeared. And all the algae that was weird went away. All the recession of the Euphilia glabrescens and the Fimbrophilia paradivism, paraangora, all of that stopped. So the only thing I did was add metal halides, and that's proof enough for me. And then when the meters were brought back and I got to see the UV properties throughout the entire tank, even though I don't have them everywhere yet because I need to run more power, I've got a little bit of UV hitting every basic corner of the entire system now, and the corals are happier because there has to be something. And I'm not a scientist. I'm not a biologist. I learn a lot from talking to the different people and coming up with other ideas that they might not have thought about. And we problem solve our issues with the right people. And they all said, you know, it's a very good possibility that if there's no UVB or C hitting your substrate, that it's allowing this funky, weird algae to grow that normally wouldn't grow because the UVB or C would kill it. And also bacteria that would normally be present and probably are present in every system, but are not a dominant species that can become, say, a parasite. Like they might live in harmony with the corals with the UVB and C to keep it at bay, but if it becomes an overabundance of that bacteria, that could be what was the reason why your corals were being affected by it and dying. And it wasn't brown jelly. It was just slow recession and slowly just never opening again, and then poof, gone. But I have to say this: don't ever throw away a dead Euphyllia, because almost every single one of them, I was so pissed about them dying, I threw them in the corner of the tank, and we found babies growing on every single one of them. Yeah, we're talking 4 months later.
Whoa, jeez,
So
man.
that's pretty doggone cool.
That's resilient.
So if you have a Euphyllia, if you have a Euphyllia that dies, save the skeleton somewhere where it gets some light. Give it 4 to 6 months, and you just might have babies pop up on it again. It's pretty doggone cool.
So, dude, how do we reconcile this with an industry that is like laser focused on just putting out more and more advanced LED light fixtures, and halides are in the rearview mirror at this point. I mean, you got Tulio that sells them. Hamilton, I guess, is still cranking them out. But who else out there? Giesman used to, but I don't think they're really readily available in the United States. How does the industry kind of like reconcile that? And if that does turn out to be the reality of the situation, that LEDs are lacking the UV, how do we kind of
good question,
get around that?
It's all going to be in the evolution of LEDs and how and if they can make one affordable enough that does produce enough UV to penetrate the water of our systems. Is it going to be affordable enough for it to happen? I mean, LEDs have been around. First LED light fixtures was 2006, 5, 4, something like that. There was I can't remember the name of the company that put them out. But where we were then and where we are today is huge. I mean, leaps and bounds. And I respect the fact that they're constantly evolving LED technology. I have no doubt that one way or another, somehow they're going to figure out what they have to do to make this happen. So you do get UV properties out of the lighting, so that we don't have weird things like, happen with, I don't know if this is what happened with Mike Paletta, but I think Mike Paletta, I read a little bit about his threads. Didn't he have almost an entire crash on his SPS?
He had some RTN, STN events, and that's what happened. Some mysterious events that were going on, but he was essentially saying that it was a bacteria-related issue. That he thought it was a Vibrio, when he was treating with witch hazel to try to overcome that issue. So I think it was.
Sanjay had the same thing, was similar, where he was having, and this is the other thing I noticed with some of my SPS that were under the LEDs before I put the metal halides up, is I wouldn't have, everybody that knows acros, especially, if you have STN or RTN, it always starts at the base. I mean,
right, and Mike was saying that this was not starting from the base. This was different. It was starting like the top or the middle.
That's exactly what everybody that I've talked to that has nothing but strictly LEDs over their tanks, when they're having something weird happening in their system, it's not a normal STN or RTN event happening. It's just totally off the wall and throws you for a loop. And I was talking to Sanjay at Aquacella in Dallas, and I said, I bet you your problem with yours, and he treated it with antibiotics and he stopped the problem, but I think it started up again.
Yeah, he said witch hazel didn't solve his problem.
I think the only thing that's going to solve that problem, especially on SPS, is if you have the ability. I mean, everybody wants to get away from running metal halides because of the cost of it and the fact that their bulbs are going to be really difficult to find. I recommend to everybody that loves the aspect of the properties of LEDs, figure out how, depending on the size of your tank and what your tank is, figure out how you can hang a metal halide in there, burn it for 2 hours a day, burn it for 4 hours a day, Don't use it as your main light source, but use it as your UV source, because we have no LED UV source at this point in time. And, well, that's going to cost a lot of money. Really? I look at people, and if they say it's going to cost a lot of money, I don't even want to talk to them, to be honest with you, because if they're just thinking about the money aspect of it, it really irritates me to no end, because it's about the animals. How much money is it going to cost you to replace your animals if they all die because you were too cheap to put up a metal halide and burn it for 2 hours a day? I mean, come on. Hey, there's a lot of ways to think about things, the negative and the positive, or you take that negative and make a positive out of it, because there's always a way to make a negative into a positive. And I agree, it is expensive, but guess what? I'm not going to change. I'll spend the money because I know what we're going to get out of our corals by running metal halides and T5s. And now that I know that LEDs need a little supplemental light with the metal halide, I just bought. Tulio was like, dude, you bought like 40 metal halide ballasts and 150 bulbs and
They had
all
to
these
open up another
cleanlings, he's like,
factory for you, huh?
he's like, I don't have it all in stock. And I'm like, get it for me and just send it when it's ready. You know, I'm going to be a month or two out before I can use it
I'm
anyhow.
not asking you to name any other businesses, but do you know other coral farms out there, commercial, operations that are having similar thoughts in terms of adding halides to their systems that only had LEDs? No.
Keith, it's not that I don't want to talk to other coral farmers. I actually just met Fan from Tidal
Yeah.
Gardens, and he's a super awesome guy. And I really would like to talk to him more because I'm sure he's got some things that I can.
I'm going to
learn
have
from
him on the
and I'm
live
sure I can
stream
teach
again
him.
in the springtime.
Oh, I got to know about that. I got to jump in and chat in here with you guys a little bit. But I just don't have I don't have a ton of time, and I'm still working on my own things, and I don't want something clouding my process that we're already working on, like the ACI method for chemistry in the aquarium. I can touch on it right now, but I don't want to go into any details because I'm still learning so much about it. And I can't
When's the
wait
book
until
coming out?
Oh shit. Chris is already putting all the documentation down, and he said he's got it already ready to rock and roll. So we'll see what happens there. But
That's
it's
gonna
been
be
a
a
year
that's gonna be
of
a bestseller, dude.
nah. Come on. Thank you. That would be amazing if we do get it out and we do get a lot of people buying it. Because I'm only going to put in everything we've learned, all the negatives, all the positives, and so people can really understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. I mean, these animals are very precious to this earth. They're precious to me because it's my livelihood. It is a driving force for me to, my family is my first priority, of course, but making sure that they're healthy and have a roof over their head is, of course, the top of it. And if I don't take care of my babies at my farm, I can't do
Yeah.
that. And I don't want to ever do anything to harm them. Now, like I said, I've done some stupid things in the last year where I had a suppressed salinity for 3 months, and when I figured it out, I wanted to. I literally, I think I did cry because it was just like the dumbest thing. I'm like, you should never trust something new. You preach this all the time. Why did you not? Yeah, but
So a couple comments here that I wanted to just throw out, and I was thinking about this too. But my Simple Reef mentions, how about WWC? They use only LEDs, and you ever see their tanks? And yeah, there's others out there too that are only LED only operations. I think Unique Corals might only be LEDs, but yeah, I mean, what do you think, Chris, in terms of those operations that crank out great stuff only using LEDs?
so we truly 100% farm corals in our farm systems. It is a farming operation. These corals are grown from frags and they grow up, and it's not something that we get in and we get out. It's not something we farm for a little bit and we get rid of it. These are corals we have in possession for years, decades is going to be down the road. It's not, in my opinion, it's different for what we're doing and what retail operations
I
are
hear you.
doing and some other farms.
Yeah.
So I can't really comment on what they're doing, any of these other people that you're mentioning, because I don't know exactly how their operation works. I can only tell you what I've learned from my experiences with my farm systems. And if somebody's got a different outcome and they can show me data and not just tell me, I don't want to hear you say something. I can show you data. I can show you my dead corals. I can show you what the
Yeah,
corals look like
Telegram's
before.
asking whether you can share your physicist's data.
Go to reeflabs.com.
Reeflabs.com.
If you want an anal retentive guy that's going to make sure your ICP test is as accurate as possible, reeflabs.com is the best ICP out there, in my opinion, because I know for a fact that he takes care of that piece of equipment. As a matter of fact, it's down right now because of a minor issue, and unfortunately the part was like $5,000 and it's not going to be here till Sunday. So it's a week behind on ICP tests, but he could run the machine and give you inaccurate results, but he refuses to. So he's waiting for that proper part to come to make sure that he gives his customers the most accurate data out there on ICP. We're a distributor for them, actually the only distributor right now. And then there's a couple online retail vendors that sell it, Aquaholics Aquaculture and reefmasters.com, reef-masters.com. I think, I don't remember.
And maybe
exactly,
maybe a ReefBum will be selling it in the future.
And I'll be talking to you about that. That was something I've been wanting to talk to you about for a while, because, you know, I've done every ICP on the market, and I've never seen consistency like I've seen with Gene and his ICP tests. I even tried to trick him and send him 2 samples of the same system, you know, and I told him, I said, one day I'm going to trick you. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you'll figure it out. If you don't, then I'm really going to be upset. And it was so funny because he took the samples, and it was the day that I told him, I said, can you get me my test results back in like 2 hours from the time you leave here? Can you have them in like 2 hours? And he's like, yeah. I'll go right back to the lab and I'll run them real quick. So I wanted to calibrate my tridents. So we tested our alkalinity, and I had his calcium and his magnesium readings to calibrate the tridents. He calls me, he goes, something's weird. And I'm like, why? What's wrong? What happened to the machine? He's like, no, he's like, I have, he's like, look at the website. He's like, I just uploaded your results. And I started laughing. He's
Would you
like,
pull water from the toilet or something?
No, I pulled water from Grow Out 1, and I labeled it as Grow Out 2. And everything else was pulled from the right system, but Grow Out 1 and Grow Out 2 had numbers that were so dead on, except for it was like in a part per billion on the one that was different. I mean, they were so doggone close that they, you know, there's minor discrepancies are normal with seawater ICPs. And to see that the water came back with almost 100% accuracy from one test to the next, and they were tested one, and then the next one was done. You know, I don't even know if he tested them right next to each other, but, you know, there was other tests possibly done in between that, and they were almost 100% identical, probably 99%. And I've done that with other ICP companies out there, and I've had such discrepancies from, and I've tricked them. Well, didn't tell them, of course, and I get the results from the system is one says this, and the other sample from the same water is totally different. And I'm like, that's not right. You guys are wrong. And I called up the one guy and was talking to him. I'm not going to name names. And they asked me how I know all of this. And I'm like, well, I've got good people on my side.
Yeah, we got a visitor there.
I'm really not. Yeah. I said, I'm really not happy that you're charging me $40 for your test, and it's bullshit. I mean, to be blunt, I mean, I'm a blunt person. Sorry if sometimes these tests are complete BS, and it's disheartening because, especially in this day and age with how the economy is and how it's hard, you know, people, every dollar they spend on their aquarium needs to be at the best value they can get out of it. And if they're spending $40 or $30 or whatever it is on an ICP kit, and they can't even trust the test results, what's the point? Genes, I guarantee you can trust it. I trust it so heartedly, 100%. Because if not, I wouldn't be doing the things I'm doing with my system right now with all the minor trace elements that we're adding. And that's a whole other conversation. But it's been a fun ride, and I love having it right down the road from me. And heck, I can run a sample down there in the middle of the night, and he'll meet me there if I need to, because I'm freaking out about something. That's the great thing.
Well, that's dedication, dude. All right, man. We're like an hour and a half into this thing, and we haven't even like checked out the cool videos that Amanda sent to me.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
I'm ready to go as long as you want.
Yeah, man.
I just need to get somebody to go grab me a beer because I'm out.
Yeah, me too. I might have to text my wife.
My wife's listening, so I'm waiting to see her walk across the sliding glass doors right there. Go grab me a beer.
Chris needs to get
Honey,
needs
please.
to get topped off. There's a couple. Well, I had like 2 pages of questions for you, dude, and I don't think I've asked one of them yet. So
go for it. Let's do it.
I got a lot of different questions for you, but I know a lot of folks out there are. I'm just looking at the chat. Oh, Alex Correa's in the house. We're just talking about metal halides, buddy. he's the biggest advocate for metal halides out there. Yeah. He's going for the record, Jake says.
I have stockpiled enough metal halide.
Jake's talking about the time record for rapping. Yeah,
oh, gotcha.
No, I know you got a stockpile of metal halide bulbs. I might be knocking on your door there if I need some. Let's before we check out the amazing coral videos that you guys sent along to me. Bacteria dosing. So this is
Yes.
something that was really not on my radar until about a year ago, and truthfully, I didn't really think much about it until I started talking with folks on this show about it. And it seems like it's to an established reef tank dosing bacteria. A lot of folks are doing it, and there's certain reasons why they might. Oh, look at that, man! He's got his loving that. So there's several different reasons why folks might be dosing bacteria to establish reef tank, or even maybe a semi new reef tank. One is dinoflagellates, and I've heard anecdotal evidence that doing so will increase the biodiversity and help fight back the dinos. But there's also a large contingent of folks that do it on a constant basis, whether they have dinos or not. And it's something that I started doing, experimenting with back in the summertime, because I had some cyano in my 187-gallon tank, and I don't like to use chemicals to fight cyano or anything else. I just don't like to zap the bacteria in the tank like that, because I just there could be collateral damage, right, in terms of the good guy bacteria that get zapped along with the the bad stuff. So
I'm with you.
So I use natural means. I'll skim, water changes, siphon out detritus, all that stuff, and also manually remove the algae. I think that's a big thing that you got to do. Is if you got cyano, suck it out every now and then. But so I had some cyano in the tank, and I know why it's there, because the tank is wall to wall with corals, and the flow is restricted in there. So it's tough to kind of get all that detritus out. But I do take a power head every now and then and blow it around, try to get it into that water column and removed by the mechanical filtration. So
feed your corals too.
Yeah, there you go. Why not? And so I started playing around with it. I started dosing the Microbacter clean, and that stuff is more geared towards helping with the green nuisance algae, and the MB7 Microbacter 7 is more geared towards like the red and brown algae. So I started out with clean, started dosing that, and then I started also dosing the Microbacter 7. And I just put out a video on this and talked about my observations after 6 months of dosing bacteria. One of the things that I stopped doing was using Chaeto, and I know you use algae scrubbers, right, to help control nutrients, but what it actually crashed my my Chaeto on both systems. I'm dosing it on both systems actually. My 187-gallon system, my 225-gallon Peninsula tank. So it crashed the Chaeto, which was fine because the nutrients essentially went up slightly. My nitrates are like in the 2.5 to 5 part per million range, and they went up to maybe like 10 in one of the systems, and maybe it didn't go up. I don't think they went up at all in the other system. Phosphates went up very slightly. So, one of the benefits I thought in terms of bacteria dosing was that I didn't have to really worry about the Chaeto. And, Chaeto for me crashes every now and then. It can be kind of a pain in the butt to maintain. I've never used an algae reactor, so I couldn't speak to that in terms of how difficult it is. But I know on a commercial level, like what you got going on, you need some real, powerful stuff to control the nutrients. But for me, the bacteria dosing was actually substituted for using Chaeto, which was nice. I like that.
Yeah.
But, the net for me was that the corals still look pretty good. When I first started doing it, corals look great. At this point, my corals in both systems are looking great. The cyano is pretty much gone, which is cool. But I guess this is a very, very long-winded question for you, Chris. Where I'm heading is, have you ever dosed bacteria, or is that just not feasible on a commercial system like yours?
Every single
You
day.
do?
Every single day. The Reef Blueprints remediate. It's a dry bacterial supplement that you can add, and we also do the inoculate 3 times a week. And I didn't do this until probably June was when I started, because I was having some of these issues in my system
This past June.
Yeah, this past June with my SPS, I was having some of these issues, and I come to find that it was all because of my hydrometer
Yeah.
that I, never checked. But I never stopped adding the bacteria when I figured out what that problem was with the salinity. And I noticed that the growth, I don't think I noticed anything different with my SPS. I don't really observe anything that's highly noticeable. But where I noticed the big differences with dosing bacteria on a daily basis is with the LPS corals. My Gonioporas are just, I mean, they are growing. Their polyp extension is insane.
After the
And
bacteria dosing,
no,
all
all
the
the
time, but
time.
more
I
so
mean,
after the
I mean,
bacteria dosing.
no,
Okay.
not at all. I mean, it's just, I don't think it changes from hour to hour to minute to minute. I mean, it's consistently when I go back, and I can tell, of course, when the lights just come on, they're not fully, expanded, but I can tell that they're happy, and it seems like they don't fully retract anymore like they used to. Like I used to go back and look at my Gonnies on the farm. If I went in the middle of the night and it was, I get the blue light out and start looking, and I'd see them completely sucked in. They look like a little golf ball, and now when I go in, and this is only since the bacteria dosing has been, they're not like all sucked in like a little golf ball. They're like, polyps are barely sticking out. You can still see the tentacles. They're not completely retracted. And I had to go into the farm last night at 2 a.m. because for whatever dumb reason, my Wi-Fi router went out and my apexes were all offline at the same time. And I'm like, something's wrong. So here I am at 2 a.m. driving back to the farm to go check it. Now, of course, I always look at stuff on there, and those Gonnies were still just, extended about this far. And during the day, they're like open up to about a racquetball size. And when they're closed, they're about the size of a golf ball. And I never saw that or observed that before I started putting bacterias in. Now, is it just the bacteria? I cannot tell you yes, because I had already started doing my experimentation with minor and trace elements. So we've been dialing in minor and trace elements long before we started dosing the bacteria. And I did notice with the minor and traces that I had, some better growth and everything out of all the other corals. But as soon as the bacteria got introduced, it just took off. And I still don't have the minor and traces dialed in because there's just way too much to go by. There's too many variables. It's going to take years to figure that whole process out. And thank goodness I have a Gene down the road and I can do my ICPs
There you
whenever I want to. But the bacteria is bacteria content in your system, which is part of your biomass of your system, is super important. And you don't hear anybody talk about this either. Some people do, but not very many. It's not something common to hear. Is people don't dose minor and trace elements in their system because nobody really talks about it. What we're finding is, okay, we did one of those biome tests before we started doing all this. I think I did that a year ago.
Aquabiomics. Yeah.
Yes, aquabiomics. Did one about a year ago. I was like 586 species of bacteria living in my system. It broke it down to what species they were. And there was a handful of Vibrios in there, but that's not uncommon. They're there. They're present. I did another microbiome test September, 898 different species of bacteria. Nothing's changed.
And you're not using UV, right?
On the system that I tested, I don't have UV on. It's my farm system. My other systems, I do have UVs on them. And I found some very good beneficial things about UVs on a coral system, especially a wild coral system. It's been so kicking myself in the rear end for not putting a UV on my wild coral systems, 14 years ago. But it made such a big difference in the biomass and the bacteria content living in there, and the minor and traces fuel that. And how we know that is by testing skimmate. And what your skimmer is removing, the proteins it's removing is in a lot of cases, dead bacteria.
So Chris, how do you quantify that? Because when I had Sanjay on, we were talking about that, and I said to him, like, things have changed, because years ago I never even considered, dosing bacteria, and that was not something people did. We didn't have to worry about it. But, do you think that today the equipment is just so much more efficient? Skimmers are so more efficient, and filtration systems are more efficient, that it's pulling out, the beneficial bacteria. And he's like, where's the data? Prove that to me.
I have I will put it all out to everybody. There's too much up and down and all around for people to even understand what's going on in the systems right now. I mean, I've got almost 9 months of weekly ICP tests, so you can actually see. Now, the only thing I don't have in that data is, okay, I did a big water change on this system in between these two tests. And that's something that I need to be more adamant about doing, so that I can really show true data of the results that we're seeing with just making sure our minor and traces are present, not at natural seawater levels. But here's what I have the question to ask everybody that doesn't believe that minor and trace elements need to be in our systems. First of all, I'm going to ask you why. And second of all is, they're in the ocean. It's found in seawater. It's obviously beneficial for the ocean. Something is utilizing these minors and the trace elements, whether it's the corals directly or some sort of bacteria that grows and feeds off of this particular element that's in ours. Why wouldn't you want that in your system to duplicate the ocean as best as you possibly can? I get people saying it's a waste of time, it's a waste of. Okay, I'm going to prove you're wrong, for one, because I already see the benefits of it. And I think that there's so many unknowns, and the variables that are involved with what we're doing is so great that people are afraid of it. And that's why we put that Isolate MT on the market, which is a broad spectrum minor and trace element additive you can put into your system. And it's not going to give you natural seawater levels of all those elements, but it's going to, at least if you're adding it every day like you should be, it's at least going to make those elements present for the time that they can be present before they're utilized by whatever, the coral, the bacteria, the algae, the rotifers, the copepods. I mean, what uses it? Nobody knows. And that's what we want to know, because it's obviously a part of seawater. So we want to know why nobody wants to put it into their systems, and what are the benefits of us doing that. And I'm seeing such benefits just from the MT, and now working with three minor traces right now: copper, manganese, and vanadium, and iron. There's 4 of them. So we're doing them right now and really monitoring them and dialing in the dosage that we need from week to week, because the benefits are huge. I mean, I can only show you from before and after photos is all I can show you right now. I don't have it to show you right now, but I have it in my database. But when it all comes out and we lay it all out, and what we had before and what we have now on the same exact coral, it'll blow your mind. I mean, it's amazing what's happening.
A couple things. Thank you, My Simple Reef, for that super chat. And the comment is, love chats. Thank you, guys, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Reef the Sea Forever asked, do you keep traces at the natural sea levels, or are they raised up a little?
Honestly, it's impossible to keep your traces at natural seawater levels, because certain ones get utilized quicker than others. So if you're going to keep your traces at natural seawater levels, you need to know exactly how much of that particular trace element is uptaken every single day in your system. And again,
that's tough.
There's variables that are going to make it different one day versus the next day versus the next day. So to keep them maintained at exactly natural seawater levels is virtually impossible. But Gene, being the physicist and the genius that he is, he has a way for us to figure that out. And I cannot wait until he's ready to do it with his new ICP MS machine, because we can't do it with an OES machine. It doesn't measure in parts per trillion. And when that machine is up and running and we can measure in parts per trillion, we already have made a 10-head peristaltic pump that is going to be for 10 individual minor and trace elements that we know are utilized are uptaken or dissipate out of your system very quickly, so that we can figure out how much is being dissipated on a daily basis. And then we can set that dosing pump to make sure that that amount is put into the system continuously all day long. That's going to be a huge game changer for everything, because when we can do that, and we already know what they're doing for the corals that in particular that utilize them, we just don't know what it would be like if they were present 24/7. And that's going to be the fun part.
Yeah.
And I mentioned copper earlier. I'm actually having to dose copper almost every 3 days because my copper levels are down below 9 parts per billion. And without copper, photosynthesis doesn't really do its job properly. And a lot of people don't talk about that. I mean, I remember people coming over and me putting a dropper going 1, 2, 1, counting the drops out of copper I'm dumping in a 2,000-gallon system. What are you doing? I'm like, it's not medicine. It's just making sure my level is correct towards natural seawater, and photosynthesis will actually
do what it's supposed to be
performed better. So keeping in mind, all of our corals rely on that zooxanthellae for photosynthesis to create the sugars to feed them. If we don't have copper at all in our systems, that coral is being fed an inferior food, per se, because it's not being fed what it should be, because it doesn't have the proper elements to create the sugars that it should be creating if that is not present. I'm not telling everybody, don't go out and start dosing copper your daggone aquarium, please.
No, Chris is at a whole different level here than us hobbyists. That's for damn sure. Dude, let's look at some corals. I want to.
Yeah, let's look at them. I've been waiting for this for an hour and a half. I love this video. Are you doing this?
Yeah.
Video?
So all right, we're gonna. All right, so folks, Chris and I are gonna count down to 3 here because we want to make sure we're synced up. So
sync our video.
3, 2, 1, play. All right.
All right. Oh, that's a new one. I love this coral. It's we just fragged. We had 3 colonies of it. We just fragged it. That doesn't do it justice. And our gold dragon is, since we've been doing all of the minor and traces and everything else, the colors have been just going crazy. I mean, I honestly couldn't tell you half the names of any of these corals, even though most of them do already have names. But this is that's the yellow tips acropora. That right back there. I should have paused it.
I can't pause it, man.
If we go, no, it's okay. That one coral that was real smooth skin was actually Cali Tort.
Oh, wow.
Growing in a way I've never seen it grow before. I think there's another video of it coming up here soon. It didn't come out clear. Is yours clear, Keith?
Seems like it.
Yeah, mine's not clear on mine right now. I can't even see. That was the frog skin. There's my pearl berries. I got those. They were 2 fragments, an inch long.
Those are RRA pearl bears? No,
yeah,
I love that coral. Love that coral.
There, look at how smooth and how weird that growth is. That there's my gosh, I can't do names. That was
bird's nest. I see a bird's nest.
Back there.
Millie.
Yeah, I had to keep it. There's tons of millies.
I love millies.
I can't.
Do you find millies?
Do
you find millies? You're not looking at the live stream. You're looking on your own thing, right?
Yeah. There's the that's the fuzzy navel millie. This is that one, that big one that was all, you can see it was cut up. There, Jake, you'll love that piece right there. There's your Florida. I butchered it. I've got 140 frags. There's the 2 Florida colonies, the toxic Floridas that Jake sent me back. I don't know. When did you send it to me? Is it back at the beginning of COVID? So it'll soon be 2 years. We got over 100 frags to sell of it now from a frag he gave us. That's the plasma blast and acropora. That does not do it justice. The metal halides are on. That coral is so orange. The polyps are blue.
Right now the metal halides are not on.
On this one here, they were. Yeah, because I can see the plasma blast. I can see the shimmer on it. They might have gone off right after that. But I don't know the names of half of these. I have to look up the photo.
Table.
And then, yeah, but I mean, we just fragged that coral down. Finally, it needed to be done.
It looks like a pink Cadillac there.
That is a pink Cadillac right there. I've got a lot of pink Cadillac. There's like 5 colonies that size. There's the pink panther.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah, it's my favorite coral in the whole entire farm. Jake gave me the very center nub of that coral encrusting barely over a hexagonal plug, and that's what it looks like today. 6 months later, it's grown like a weed.
Yellow,
There's more of the
tips.
yellow tips, yeah, and then we have the Austera. That's Austera. We have a Sunbeam Austera that's on the other tank that she might have in this video. But yeah, I mean, this isn't even the best side. This is where like all the older colonies are. The other side's got all the newer stuff, where all the tenuous, the millies, there's the Immortal Tort that Jake got me. That is the believe it or not, that's a spathulata. That big red colony. That's the scarlet spathulata. There's another big piece of pink Cadillac. I didn't name this one yet, but we just fragged one of the colonies. The polyps. Look at the polyps on that thing. It's just insane.
Crazy.
I mean, there's so many corals on the acro side. This is only showing one side of it from this video that I can see so far. But and it's very unfortunate. I wish I had all the big colonies I used to have. That stupidity of mine. Here it is. That's an ORA Calitor.
That is? Really?
That's Calitor.
Huh. That's all showing a lot of green for a Calitor.
But it's also showing a weird growth pattern too that I've never seen. Now I have another Calitor that's in deeper water under 400 watt metal halides that doesn't look anything like that, and that blows my mind. That one right there, the purple one with the reddish polyps. Can't wait for that one. And then we got some nice strawberry shortcakes.
Love shortcakes.
We always start every coral on the farm that's an acro that we're going to farm as a small fragment, or if we have a chop shop that we really like, we take the butt, is what I call it, where you can't frag anymore. It's just a bunch of big, distorted, ugly piece of coral, and stick it to a plug and let it grow out. But here's a really amazing tenuous. That one right there, when we launch it, is going to be called the Chernobyl.
Is that the Immortal Tort right there, which is blue by?
Oh, I'm not sure. I wasn't paying attention
strawberry
to
shortcake.
Yep. There's another yellow tips. And that coral grows like a doggone weed for us. I have it on the market all the time, and it's a great beginner SPS coral. There's a Calitor growing properly. Yeah, my Calitor's always showed that.
My Calitor is like a lot more dense. My branches are a lot thicker.
Well, you have to understand, we're not letting it grow. Yeah. I mean, once it grows out to a certain point, we're cutting the whole thing down, and it's just that base that's left over, and it's got to regrow. So there's my Sir Sonoy.
Beautiful.
There's that's called the Crimson Acro, which is a Valida of all things. That is like a crimson red in it. It's very, very cool looking. There's another piece of fuzzy navel off to the right of this big toxic green purple colony. Oh God, I love acros. If this wasn't going so fast, this tenuous right here is a ripper. You can't see the subtle colors in it, but we've got probably 50 tenuous that are all different on the farm right now. That's the ACI Marvin the Martian.
Marvin the Martian. I like that name.
Yeah, it's actually very, very reddish purple with the bright green on it. And this is the Martian Manhunter. That was a nemesis of mine, the Hydnophora back there. I couldn't grow it for years, and all of a sudden we started doing really well. And all I did was boost my suppressed pH. There's the Gold Dragon. We got that from my buddy Vincent Chalais. We got a bunch of colonies of it. Again, I don't know the names of 90% of these with just looking at them, because I've never been a big fond person of the name game thing, but I have to with the stuff that we farm, and I guess just get a little bit more versed with it.
Yeah.
Every one of the tiles has a label on the bottom. There's the black Hydnophora that Jake sent me, black and yellow.
Oh, that's cool.
And this is the Manila Spy. Jake, chime in. I forget the species you told me it was. We thought it was hirsuta, but it's not. That thing is red as red can be. And he sent me a small fragment of that thing back in June. And this is our toxic pie and Acropora. And then this is, I think Jake and I came together and we think this is Aqua tuberculata montipora, because what he sent me was all branching and we thought it was hirsuta. And then all the tips of the branches started getting these little tables growing on them. I'm like, what is that? That's not hirsuta. And he's like, yeah, I think it might be Aqua tuberculata. So this acro right here in the beginning, showing, is it still showing?
No, we're done.
Okay. But that one there was supposed to be a red dragon, but as it's morphed,
it's not a red dragon.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Not a red dragon. gold dragon. I'm sorry, but it's morphed. It's pink and gold and blue. Very unique.
Dude, all I could tell you is that I was probably drooling in all your grow out tanks when I was there, in April, because my jaw was like hitting the ground. I mean, it was like Fantasyland, just incredible in terms of seeing all that stuff growing out, and the just as far as the eye can see, just beautiful corals, and we also have a reel now of the LPS. Do we want to show that?
Oh my gosh, yeah, we have to show it. We might as well. Let me
tell me when you're ready.
She showed me what to do earlier, and of course I'm so doggone computer illiterate, I can't remember what I did. All right, hit the back button and second video.
You tell me when you're ready.
3, 2, 1, play.
All right.
Okay, this beauty right here. Okay, you cannot gauge the size of this coral. This coral is bigger than a basketball, weighed over 40 pounds. It is a Goniopora. It is like a purplish, pinkish color. It just finally left for its new home today. It's going to go live its life out in a 5,000-gallon tank at a private home. I sold it to a big maintenance company that did the installation on the tank. But this coral, I mean, it blew my mind when we got the box in, because I actually was so busy that day I didn't get a chance to look at my boxes and what was coming in. So I don't even like doing that anyhow, because I don't want to know. I want Christmas Day. I want
the surprise.
Christmas Day every time. So Daniel, my manager, he comes to me. He's like, dude, he's like, help me pick this doggone box up, dude. He's like, it weighs like 100 pounds. And I'm like, what? And I looked at the label, and then I looked at the packing list, and I'm like, there's 4 pieces of coral in here. I'm like, and 3 of them are carpet anemones. I'm like, what?
Wow.
And one's a Goni. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Mega Goni.
My head went straight to Goni's going to be dead. It scared me. And we got it opened up and pulled the carpets out, and I put this coral in the tank, and within 15 minutes, the thing was starting to polyp out.
No acclimation.
Look at that. No acclimation. It was bleachy. The water was milky.
Really?
Oh, well, 60 hours in a box. And if you defecate a couple of times, you're going to be in pretty bad shape too, aren't you? That's the thing that people don't realize when we import. If they aren't packed properly and they have a 60-hour travel to get to me, they're going to defecate in that bag, and they're going to have problems. All of my suppliers, from all the times I've visited in Indonesia, I've told them, don't put a coral in the bag unless it is completely sucked in, because then you know that there's no water inside of that coral for it to possibly have already been working up a bathroom break, per se. Pack it when it doesn't have anything in it, and if it pulls water in and still decides to do it, we did our best to not allow it to do it right after it got put into the bag and then go on its journey. At least if it does it, halfway through the journey, it's going to be a better chance of it surviving than doing it in the beginning of its journey. So that water was so milky that I was so nervous about it. I grabbed, I put a Gyre 180, FX 180, an old one that I didn't have running. I threw it right on the tank and had it blowing straight for it. It was about 3.5 feet away from it, in between 2 250-watt metal halides. And it sat there for 4 months. No, I'm sorry, that wasn't that coral. That sat there for 2.5 months and finally made it to its new home today.
Wow.
So I'm so proud of that piece of coral, because in most cases that coral would not be alive. But because of the TLC that I gave it from the day it came in, they're not easy. I mean, believe it or not, a piece of coral that large, especially on a Goniopora side, is a difficult coral to ship around the world alive, for one. But then once it gets to your facility, putting it in the conditions where it's got the right flow going around it, so it's going through, and that's not just one piece. It actually it's got 3 big lobes on it, and you can see in the when it played, you can see the where the lobes were, and there's actually full blown cracks. You could stick a piece of paper through it the whole way, and they're separated polyps or not polyps, almost like little smaller colonies of it, because it's really cool. Very cool.
Chris, man, I mean, I don't think you have to really worry about importing stuff that size anymore, because the way you can grow corals, I mean, you could probably grow something like that in 3 months, for crying out loud.
Oh, I wish. If I could grow Gonis that fast, I'd be doing really well, because I've got some prize ones that they're growing, but there's so many species of Goni, and what we don't know about Goniopora is probably our biggest downfall.
Dude, I've got some. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you a question. I might have asked you this question before, but I've got like this red planaria that's on one of my. It's on two gonnies. It's on a green gonnie, and it's on a I don't know what I would call this. It's kind of like a brownish beige, really cool gonnie. Not on my red gonnies, but it's like a red planaria, and I've tried a whole bunch of different dips, and have not been able to get rid of these planaria, because what I think is going on is the tentacles are receding into the skeleton and being protected from the dip. Any tips on how to get rid of those buggers?
I do. There is a planaria that is a pest on a lot of different corals. Now, do you know if this is an Australian or an Indonesian?
What, the gonnie?
The gonnie.
It's a farm raised, so I don't know.
Okay. So what I've learned over the years of importing, I remember one time, it was so funny. One of my customers down here in Tampa, I had gotten in these Lobophilias from Australia. Actually, we now know them that they are Acantharia pachyceptus. But they had these purple spots all over them. And I'm like, what is this? I dipped them, and they were inside the coral, in the tissue.
Oh.
And I'm going, what the heck? Well, I didn't even realize that until I'm like talking to my one customer who's a freak about crazy weird stuff. And I'm like, dude, you got to check out this freaking coral, dude. It's got these purple spots all over it. And he's like, what? I'm like, it's all orange, bright green center, purple spots throughout the whole thing. And no dip is removing them. And I'm not paying attention enough to them to find that they're actually moving. Well, long story short, he figured out that they eventually come out the mouth and leave the coral, and you can remove them that way. But the only way you can remove them that way is if you have them in a separate type quarantine system that is water from the system, that got lights over it and everything, and you put power. It's just like a regular system, and you let the coral act normal. And when you see them outside on the outside of the tissue and not inside, that was when he would put in a heavy iodine or a heavy dose of something that would irritate him and knock him off.
You'd have to treat them while the coral is in full bloom.
Exactly. So you can get rid of that on your gonnie, but you're going to have to set up if you have a 10-gallon tank sitting there that you can keep the temperature, from fluctuating tons or, getting too cold or too warm, and then just let it act normal, and then put in, I think he even told me that flatworm exit worked on those.
Yeah, I've tried a couple of different things, and I've tried like tripling the amount of time that I've had the coral in the dip and all that stuff, and the tentacles just suck into the skeleton and protect the flatworms.
So they're on the oral disc. On the oral disc of the polyp, not on the stem.
They're on the stems. They're on the tentacles.
Oh, they're on the stems. So do you know if they're inside the coral or they're outside?
They're on the outside of the coral.
They're on the outside of the coral. Okay, so
my theory is that they're on the outside of the coral, but when that gonnie is pulled out of the water, those tentacles retract, protecting the flatworm.
We ran into the exact same problem with gonioporas, and we have more of a problem with the gonioporas that come out of Australia than anywhere else. With having, we found goniopora eating nudibranchs that you can't tell the difference between a polyp and a nudibranch. Wait, the whole colony's closed up, but that one spot, why is that polyp not closing? We get a little pick, it's dead underneath it too, because he ate the polyp that he was on top of mimicking. It's pretty wild how nature works, isn't it? But we figured out how to get rid of them, and it's exactly what I just said. Just take a 10-gallon tank, put a little bit of water into it, give it this environment where it's going to be happy, and then put your flatworm exit or whatever in there, and that will irritate them, and it'll fall off. And it did take us a while to get them all completely off, but Pierre with the Acantharia pachycepta, it took him forever and a day. He's like, I'm still trying to get these stupid purple dots out of my damn coral. But it was a flatworm. And it's,
there's like tons of flatworms. There's a lot of flatworms you can't even see. You got to put them under a microscope, corals under a microscope. You see like a little flatworm bugging around, but they're not all of them are harmful to the corals. So that's part of the game. But
It's when they've come like plague proportions, like those planarias that we know as flatworms that everybody hates that are photosynthetic, and they just multiply,
Yeah.
multiply, and
Knock
multiply.
on wood, I've
They'll
never
just
had
smother
those suckers, but man, that would suck.
I see there's doggone things on every single shipment.
All right.
Every single
Yeah,
shipment.
I bet you've seen a lot of stuff. All right, dude. Well, listen, man. I think we're gonna start wrapping this thing up. And
All right.
Chris, man,
we're not going to go for another 12 minutes. It'll beat the time the last time.
we could do that. You know what you want to?
Whatever you want to do.
I can go for another.
I'm enjoying
I can go
this.
for another 12 minutes. Blue Reef. You can see the passion Chris loves his job. Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Well, what else do we want to talk about here? I mean, any anything you want to end on?
Yeah, I do. I think if people start embracing the pH of their aquariums and not chasing their alkalinity in their aquariums, that they'll start realizing that this hobby isn't necessarily a money pit. I grew up and didn't have a whole lot, and it strived me to be better. And with that being said, I learned the value of $1 a long time ago, and I'm very, very fortunate that we've been able to do ACI the way we've done it because of my wife's full and total support, and my passion and my drive, and her passion and her drive, and my kids, enjoying it. All the support we get from our customers is a big driving factor for what we do. But what my point is there's a lot of ways to reef, to maintain your aquarium, and I'm not trying to sound like the bad guy here when it comes down to companies that are marketing, additives that go in their aquariums, but they're doing exactly that. They're marketing additives that need to go into your aquariums because you need to have them for these animals to stay alive. And my whole thing with reefing is it's a hell of a lot simpler than what some of this stuff that is on the market makes it out to be. If you do it in a simple way by boosting your pH with calcium hydroxide or kalkwasser, you get your carbonates from your kalkwasser. In a high demand system like Keith's fully dominated SPS tank, he needs to have a calcium reactor on there to help make up for the demand that the kalkwasser cannot put into your aquarium. But I could afford, back when we were doing a different method, we could afford $1,500 a month for calcium reactor media, CO2, occasional alkalinity buffing, all the other aspects. Is $1,500 a month is what the company had to spend to maintain. At that point in time, it was 5 coral systems. We now have 7 coral systems. With boosting my pH, just the pH boosting alone cut that $1,500 a month down to less than $100 a month.
Yeah, that's big. That's big, man.
Participating in.
My point with all this is everybody's got their ways of doing things. There's a lot of people out there in this country that cannot afford a reef aquarium, and it's not because of the maintaining of the aquarium with all that needs to be done to keep it so that the corals are alive. It has a lot to do with the cost of the corals. So if you can save money on maintaining these animals and helping them thrive instead of just survive, I think that speaks volumes. And I don't know how big my presence is in the reefing world. I try to be as humble as I can be, but I also try to only put out the things that we've learned from all the experiences that we've had with very large coral systems. And, this can all be incorporated into small coral systems as well. And it's just doing the math to do it. And I can help people with it. But people are skeptical about dosing kalkwasser be skeptical about it. If you want to learn how to save money and to make your corals truly thrive in your aquarium, from all that we've done in the past to what we're doing now, it's an amazing thing that we're seeing with boosting the pH of our systems. And now that we're tweaking our trace elements and we have the ability to be able to do that, it's going to make things so much easier for that guy that has a job that cannot afford an aquarium, but maybe now can, because he's not spending $100 a month on additives, and he can spend $100 a month on corals for his kids to be happy. You know, that's really the whole point of ACI Aquaculture. Is I was a hobbyist at one point. I couldn't afford a Steve Tyree frag at $110. And I wanted that SPS frag so bad. And I'm like, I know I can do this better so that people can afford these things. And nothing against Steve, because he grew that stuff. You know, I respect it. I get it. But I'm trying to make it even easier and more affordable for people to afford. So with that being said, boost your suppressed pH. Your corals will thank you for it. And Keith can attest to that as well. And I've got many other people that can attest to it. And, you know, I hope you guys enjoyed this this live chat, because I sure did. And I know I could go on for hours, but it is about 2 hours into it. It's time to get going.
Well, the record is you, me, and Jake. We talked for about 2 hours and 37 minutes. So we're gonna fall short on that. But you know what? We'll maybe we'll get both of you guys back on in a few months, and we'll try to break the record. Then we get Mr. Adams
I'm all for it. I'm ready to do it whenever you guys are ready to do it. We'll have to start at 6 o'clock again instead of 7.
Yeah, that's right. You guys wanted to start at 6. I was like, why are we doing that? It's because you knew, like, I'm like, bedtime for me is like.
She even knows it's time to go. My main coon. Love it.
Cutie. All right, dude. Well, listen, man. Thank you so much, Chris, for taking time again to chat with us. I always learn something, man, when I'm talking to you. And I always, even though like this is recording a live stream, I'm taking notes. You know.
I'll watch it over again too, because I'm sure I missed some things. You know, I learned from you too, Keith. I learned from everybody's questions. You know, I enjoy doing these types of things, and you know, I'll do it anytime you're ready to do it, buddy. And thank you for asking me and having me on.
So, folks, if you want to get your hands on some of these awesome ACI Aquaculture corals, reach out to your LFS and ask them to reach out to Chris and his team, because that way you can get your hands on some beautiful corals that you know are really taken care of and just are totally amazing. So please do that if you want to add some of these gems to your tanks. I've got a few of those gems in my tanks, and I am digging them, Chris. They're awesome. You know, I lost a couple of pieces, but by and large, the majority of them are thriving, and I got some favorites that.
Well, tell them why you lost a couple pieces. It's because you're strict in your quarantine, and doesn't matter who you get it from, you still go through your same quarantine process. And that is one of the reasons why your SPS tanks have been so successful, because you never steer away from that. And complacency will bite you in the ass in the long run. And believe me, it does to me. I'm sure it does to everybody. But as somebody that has a reef tank, listen to Keith.
Yeah, you gotta quarantine. You gotta just really be very diligent about that stuff, because pests can just freaking mess you up, and that would put a frown on my face. So, all right, dude. Well, listen. Happy holidays to you and Amanda and the rest of your family, as well as the rest of the team at ACI Aquaculture. And folks, that's going to do it for this show. Happy holidays to everybody out there that's been tuning in and watching Rappin with ReefBum. This is the last stream of the year, and I appreciate all the support you folks have been giving the stream. Please spread the word. I also appreciate the sponsors, Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine, for being supportive as well. And hey, if you folks want to catch replays of this, not only on YouTube, but these Rappin with ReefBums are also available as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. So my next live stream will be in 2022 on Thursday, January 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Randy Donowitz from Reefs.com. And Randy happened to be my first guest ever on this show about a year and a half ago or something like that. So we're going to have Randy back on, and looking really forward to having that conversation. All right, Chris, be safe, be well, man. Everybody else out there, the same to you, and we will see you next time.
Thank you guys for watching, and happy holiday season to everybody as well.